sound of the flat 2 chord, the Neapolitan chord. And here it comes, right here. Okay. And that took us a little bit into the closing group. So starting around measure 35, I'm calling this a third theme in a sense, although it's very much connected to the descending thirds that we've heard before, and it sort of just winds down the section, so I'm calling it a closing group. You could just call it a codetta if you wanted. Here is that music, starting at measure 35, yum pum pum, dum dum dum, dum dum dum, dum dum dum, and then an embellishment of it, dagga dagga dum, dagga dagga dum, dum 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 dum, and then dagga 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 dum dum da dum. So really, all of it is closing material. Okay, so somebody else analyzing this piece might have just said that there was two themes, right? A principal and a secondary theme, or a first theme group and a second theme group. And they might have called this just simply the codetta. I've divided it up because it seemed like what's at the beginning of it is really a third theme, but honestly, that's getting into the point of semantics. It's not that important. This is all sort of closing material, but I just called it a closing group. Okay, so we've looked at that much of the piece, and let's go into the development. What we're going to hear in the development is some music from theme 1 for the first part of the development, then some exploitation of that descending thirds from the first theme group for the second part of the development. Then the third part of the development is going to be about sort of spending a little bit of time with that Neapolitan 6 chord, and then a movement to the dominant. Sometimes that in music is called a retransition, when that dominant is presented, because it's basically there, that dominant is there to help catapult you or springboard you back into the tonic, which will be the recapitulation. So here's that part 1, and again, listen to the music from the first theme. Notice that Haydn's reversed the process. He's put the yum dum 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 in the left hand, and the right hand has more of a chordal background material. Starts in the key of A, where we left off at the end of the exposition, but it's going to move around a little bit to the supertonic, dominant, tonic. Okay. All right, and in the second part, I really like these chain suspensions. It's a variation of the idea of descending thirds, only he uses a process called augmentation. He lengthens the amount of time it takes for the descending third to happen, and he offsets them so it sounds like a chain suspension, and the left hand is doing this really wicked 16th note flourish at the same time. Notice we're back in the key of D during this, but we're moving towards the key of B minor near the end of this area. And here it is. Dun, 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 okay. And in the third part of the development, we'll see these descending cascades of 16th notes that will recall the Neapolitan 6. Now, notice we had moved to the key of the submedian, key of B minor, and in the key of B minor, the flat 2 would be a C major chord, and here it is. There's our Neapolitan 6, a C major chord, and then a secondary dominant. But we eventually wind up back on a major dominant that gets us back to A. We want to hear this A. Here it is. We want to hear this A that springboards us back into the key of B. But it sounds like we're in B minor for a while here. Even after the Neapolitan 6, we have an E sharp, which points to F sharp, which is the dominant of B minor, and this is a tonic 6. Although I should have used a lowercase Roman numeral 1 there. My apologies. It's a minor tonic 6. and then this F major chord with a minor 7, it's a dominant 7 in the key of B. But when we get to here, the B that we get is actually a dominant of the supertonic in A. So Haydn gives us a B chord here, but he gives us a B chord with an A natural on top. So we're going to start to hear that like a dominant chord, and then here we're going to hear that as if we were in the key of A, as if that was the supertonic B. So eventually, though, we get this A major chord with a G natural. So a series of dominant 7s actually. Here is a dominant 7, here is a dominant 7, it's the dominant 7 of E, and then here is a dominant 7, this A here, which is the dominant 7 of D. You don't need to know all of that, but I just want to point out there's some neat harmonic stuff happening, and it's the development that stuff usually happens, that kind of a quick, progressive harmonies. So anyway, let's listen to this, and especially for that Neapolitan chord, it'll be very striking when it happens. Right here. And back to the tonic. Okay, so there's a lot of fast-moving harmonies, tonal centers shifting quickly in the development. All right, so those are the three parts of the development, and you can see there's even a symmetry there. The first and the third are longer than the middle, just like in the whole movement. The first and the third are longer than the development itself. All right, and then the recapitulation, we're going to listen for that first theme group, the second theme group, and the closing, but especially take note that the second theme group will be in the key of D. There's going to be a transition in music that makes us sound like we're going to the key of A, but we end up not doing it. So we'll pay attention to that. Here's the opening section. There's a little extension of that first theme group, but it is basically the same thing. Here's the extension. Then a long dominant pedal. Okay. And so the transition music in the first theme group does have that 6-5-4-3 descending scale feature, and it does end on A, dum dum da dum, just like the opening did. But instead of going to A, like the in the exposition, this is going to end up going to D. So it's obvious we're done that first theme group, and now the second theme group begins in the key of D, and we've divided it again into theme 2A and theme 2B, which reminds us of the opening theme. That that happens here. Let's listen to that. Okay. And at the end of the second theme group, we have the Neapolitan 6 chord again. Now, remember that Neapolitan 6 chord in the key of A was a B-flat chord. Here, it's actually still a B-flat chord. It's kind of like the Neapolitan of the dominant. It actually isn't a 6 chord. Notice it's we're not using the number 6 because it's actually not in first inversion. It's in root position here. And we get a similar sounding secondary dominant here, but the cadential 6-4, the tonic 6-4 dominant that we end up getting is in the key of D, not in the key of A like it was earlier. Here we go. Okay, and let's move on to the closing group. And that closing material, remember I divided into 2 sections. The third theme yum dum dum, jump dum dum, dum dum dum, yum dum dum.
Ah,
It's
das
embellishment,
ist
jump dum dum,
современное.
jump dum dum, jump dum jump dum jump jump, and then that little two-measure codetta. And that's the end of the recapitulation. So you can see the symmetry here, how the exposition and recapitulation bear so much resemblance to one another, and the development adds that needed tension in the middle. So if you were to think of the theme groups as characters, you could say that they're presented, or they're exposed, or they're shared with the audience. Then the drama happens in the middle, and then there's a winding down. In drama you might call it a denouement, but a resolution of some sort, because now instead of the first and theme group being in two different keys, they're now in the same key. Maybe the first theme group is our male lead, and our second theme group is our female lead, and it's a romance. And there's a little turbulence here in the middle, but they end up in the same in the same key. They get married or whatever. They live happily ever after. There's definitely a dramatic element to this. So some questions I'd like to leave any of you viewing this presentation. Some questions to ponder are: what are the compositional advantages of using Sonata Allegro form? Why is it still being used today and adapted by composers? Maybe the Sonata Allegro form, as we've looked at it with a movement from tonic to dominant, isn't part of today's Sonata Allegro forms, but the idea that there's an exposing of themes, related themes or contrasting themes in different key areas, or at least something different. Maybe the principal theme is in the key of, or on a tonal center of C, and its partner, the secondary theme, is a tritone axis away in F sharp, or maybe a half step above in D flat. There might be some variation of it, but then there'd be a development section where all sorts of manipulations of that theme would happen, and then a return, so this larger ABA form. So what is the advantage of that? And what are some analysis strategies for spotting and tracking Sonata Allegro form, at least traditional form, or even if you were to go see a piece performed by an orchestra that you understood possibly with Sonata Allegro form by one of today's composers? What would be some strategies as you either look at the score or as you listen to it being performed to track or confirm if Sonata Allegro form is at work?
Монстры прут.
Unison chord pack.
Unison MIDI chord pack. It is super useful.
I was actually kind of blown away when I first opened it.
This has over 1,200 MIDI files that can help you make chord progressions.
It's essentially a chord pack with loads and loads and loads of chords.
Every chord is organized by triads, extended chords, borrowed and modal chords, and my favorite tab, progressions.
Oh, damn! Woo!
And it's literally like playing with Lego, playing with building blocks, and building a chord progression that way.
And spend time exploring chords, exploring chord progressions, and not worrying about music theory. I can focus on the emotion and how the chord progression makes me feel.
So there you are, minding your own business, having a grand old time, practicing at your piano. And all of a sudden you get to that octave passage. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that you practice and practice and practice, but you just can't quite seem to get. The more you try, the more tense your arms feel. And as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to playing octaves, we have a big problem. And let me explain. Now, people have been trying to solve this octave problem for a very long time, and teachers have tried to come up with solutions to help their students to develop octave technique. Some people have said, oh no, what we really need to do is we need to keep the arm in a stiff position and we need to just isolate the wrist because octaves are all about the wrist. Still, other people have said, no, what we need to do is we need to move the whole lower arm hinging at the elbow like so. Other people have said, no, what we need to do is we need to have a really loose wrist, and that's the key. Still, others have come up with solutions like, well, actually, we just need to stay really close to the keys, and if we do this, then everything's going to be better. But over the years, none of these solutions have really seemed to help that much or really solve the problem, because most people would say that after practicing in this way, they actually feel like they have more tension. However, back in the 1920s, there was this super brilliant piano professor by the name of Otto Ortmann who did all of these super interesting sciencey experiments. He was super fascinated with the musculature of the hand and the arm, and he wanted to know how it worked and how this could inform how we teach piano. And among other things, he took lots of high-speed camera footage so he could see what was really going on when people were playing extremely fast. And he wrote about all of this in a book entitled The Physiological Mechanics of Piano Technique. Now, Ortmann's book is certainly a very interesting but challenging read. However, he actually formulates a principle in his book that is the key to understanding octave technique. Now, Ortmann's principle is that when the arm is raised, the muscles that raise the arm don't have time to fully relax before the muscles that have to lower the arm must be engaged in playing octaves extremely fast. What this means is that we have opposing muscles that are going to be pushing against each other and slowly getting more and more tense. Now, Ortmann's principle is completely sound in that this is a physiological fact about the body. However, we know that there must be something else going on because of all of the great pianists throughout the ages who played octaves extremely fast without any kind of muscle fatigue. Now, this issue of having opposing muscles working against each other has probably been most notably discussed and written about by the British pedagogue Tobias, who discusses using an active upward motion, but instead of using an active downward motion where we push our arm down to the keyboard and thus have those opposing muscles, we're going to have a passive downward motion. So in other words, I'm going to let my arm fall back into the keyboard. So I'm going to lift my arm up, and then those muscles are going to release as my arm falls into the keys, and then I lift actively and passively drop back into the keys. This deals with this issue very beautifully in that now I don't have those opposing muscles that are constantly working against each other, thus building more and more tension. Now the only issue here is that if you've been playing octaves for many years, where you've been using opposing muscles and just building a habit of that tension building, it's going to be very difficult to develop this. And the way that I would suggest practicing this is first just starting on your lap. Actively lift your arm and then let it fall into your lap completely freely. And then lift your arm and let it completely fall into your lap. Once you get this and it feels really, really good, then you can move to the keyboard. But you can't immediately go fast because if you do, you'll fall into old ways and you'll notice that you're starting to get tense again. So you want to very slowly lift and then drop into the keys and lift and drop into the keys and lift and drop into the keys. And if this is patiently and practiced well, you'll find that actually this will unlock amazing hidden potential when it comes to playing octaves.
Специалисты компании Love Piano уже на связи и готовы вам помочь. Мы занимаемся только клавишными музыкальными инструментами и доставляем их по всей России. Цифровые и акустические пианино, рояли и синтезаторы. Со всем ассортиментом вы можете ознакомиться у нас на сайте.
Я. Что дальше? Ну типа, что ли? Это концовка просто. Ну это у меня. Ну вот это и был он самый. Ну наоборот, только это не это надо. Барокко. Да надо. Пока не понятно. Оборзели, что ли? Мне обратно. Все правильно. Даже если, вот смотри, женщина может все, что мужчина, но зачем? То есть, как бы даже, ну, это без разницы. Допустим, даже что так, или может, ну, как бы, ну, допустим просто. Это вообще не имеет никакого смысла. Я имею в виду, это не имеет значения даже. То есть, даже, вот, допустим, они все могут, как мужчины, точно так же. То есть, вопрос такой, то есть, как бы, зачем? Нет, зачем им? Зачем им? То есть, они же женщины, я не понимаю. Или как ты объяснишь-то? То есть это нонсенс тогда. Зачем им быть, зачем им быть тогда женского пола? То есть зачем они тогда вообще живут, если они, если они мужики, да, а не женщины? То есть, или как вот, то есть зачем? Зачем это все мочь, если они могут, то есть как бы, да, то есть я не знаю даже, как это объяснишь. Что тут непонятного, то есть зачем? Ну, значит, да, просто проще же быть женщиной, если ты женщиной родился. Даже если ты все можешь вообще сделать, да, поняла. Ну, как, ну, я просто так, ну, наоборот. Ну, это имбецильно, да, понимаешь, наоборот. Ну, он понял тебя, ну, вот это есть он самый. Ну нет, я просто говорю, что да, женщины как, наверное, то есть они в принципе могут все как, да, как будто, да. Но это не важно. Ну или все, это не суть разговора. Или все могут, но мужики имеют прогресс, пусть даже так. Это не суть разговора, это все болтология только лишь. Я имею в виду, что зачем им это? То есть принцип сам, понимаешь? Сам принцип, что женщина как что-то делает и что она как на месте мужчины. Зачем? Ты же женщина, зачем тебе это? Зачем? Объясни. То есть ты же женщина, живи женскую жизнь, тебе для чего это все, блин? Да, то есть у тебя одна единственная жизнь, зачем ты ее как мужланка живешь, как, или как это сказать-то, зря ее проживаешь. Ну, скажем, зря, может вообще во вред, черт его знает. Не знаю, доверься своим чувствам, да, то есть как бы, да, поняла, ненормальная просто, да. Значит, еще больше доверься своим, значит, еще, да, понимаю. Живи чувствами только тогда, да, понимаю, типа того, да. Меня не касается. А тебе, тут ошибаться даже негде, понимаешь, что это парадокс просто. Я говорю, вы все больные просто. Да. Нет, понимаешь, ты на меня не смотри. Если даже у меня там, то есть просто де-факто так, понимаешь? Ну, да, отвали. То есть как бы просто нету смысла в этом, понимаешь? Такую жизнь никакого, то есть, ну не знаю, нет смысла, не зачем, короче. Ну как бы да, типа да, вот ты понимаешь. Ну ладно. Ну да. Ну вот так вот такая, да. Гонишь, брешешь, блин. Чё, блин? Кстати, не очень обучаемые женщины, послушные, покладистые. Ну, в каком-то смысле, да. Ну да. Не знаю. Ну что, не так, что ли? И терпеливые. Свойства, ну такой, ну так ведь, ну что, вот. Поэтому везде учили пятерошницы, кстати говоря, да. Не знаю. Аккуратная, потому что старательная, да. Ограниченную, да. Методичную, да, это самое задачное, короче, да. нет, я ничего не говорю. Нет, ну нет, значит не я говорю. Рабыни прямо, да, взял, да. Ладно, все, пока-пока, я ушел уже. Ну, не, я понял. Как-то, да. Да, тем более. Наверное, Канада все-таки, да? Понимаю. Вот это. Понимаю, это и себя, только и все. Да. Эй, la mélodie. Вот это есть. Видите, щитчё. Всё, тихо. Равно. Мафин. Это лежит. Лежит у меня из культуры. Я просто смотрел и выкинул. Премьера этюд. Холь. Что это все было, когда?